daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Nationals podcast, and joining me today, once again, it is Max Rayman. Max, happy offseason.
Happy offseason, man. Thanks for having me back on. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a little while, and we've got a whole lot to talk about today. We're going to touch on the World Series. We're going to talk about the Nationals have a big hole to fill, and it is not involving somebody on the field. It is involving a broadcaster as well, and then we'll also kind of look ahead to this offseason, what could be a slow offseason, because there are a lot of questions to answer, not just for the Nationals, but for the players, the Players Association as a whole, and also MLB team owners, as we are heading towards a new collective bargaining agreement. We'll touch on all of that stuff today. But first, Max, I wanted to get your thoughts. You and I were talking about this before. I was pleased with the World Series result. A couple reasons. Number one, I picked the Braves in 6 games over the Yankees to start off the year. That was my prediction. Now, obviously, no Yankees, but the Braves did win in 6 games. That was kind of my pick the entire way through the playoffs. And I wasn't just saying it to stay true. I actually felt like this Braves team had a lot of good chemistry. And they had, to me, the key for them, that killer trade deadline they had absolutely propelled them to the World Series. So your thoughts on the World Series, and then also as a Nats fan, where you came down on it. As somebody, who's kind of the same universe as you, I was fine with it. I actually didn't mind the Braves winning because I just have a disposition towards the Astros. But kind of give me your thoughts on the World Series, and then also where you came at it as a Nats fan.
All right, so this might be controversial, but overall, I thought this year's playoffs were kind of boring. Like, I watched most of them, right? Almost every single game, at least a few hour innings in each game. And there's only a few games that actually stood out. A bunch of them were just, and this was part of the problem. Games taking 4 to 5 hours, be it pitching changes, injuries, the innings going 30, 40 minutes, and that's something they got to change. And usually that hasn't bothered me. This time around, it was just it felt like it was dragging. But yeah, no, I was not pulling for the Braves whatsoever. I was rooting for the Astros. I won't root for a division rival except for the Marlins because I became a Nats fan in 05 when they moved to DC. They're the only team that I haven't seen do anything. They beat the Cubs last year in the shortened season, but of the almost 20 years I've been watching baseball, they've just been the laughing stock of the division. So yeah, I have a soft side for them. Besides that, no, I won't root for a division rival. Atlanta made the playoffs, and I didn't think they were going to go far without Acuna, without Mike Soroka. I'm not the biggest guy on Jock Peterson. There's a reason the Dodgers didn't retain him. There's a reason that he hasn't always been able to hold on to a roster spot, not roster spot, a starting spot all year. But God, did he get hot in the playoffs? And so did Soler and Rosario. But there's a reason those two got traded for Pablo Sandoval and the other prospect. And it's hard to predict when someone's going to get hot. No one thought how he's going to go on the run he did. These two went on insane runs that you can't take away from them. Because that ball Jorge Soler hit in Game 6, I still don't think landed. Because holy cow, man, that thing was crushed. And a lot of people are like, why'd you root for the Astros? They cheated. And I know this is going to sound bad. Because the Nats beat them in 2019, I wasn't as upset because they beat them when they were cheating. I know it's easy to say, just beat them. And they did it. And yeah, they cheated, and it's so upsetting the way. I'm more mad at Manfred than I am at them.
Right.
Because Manfred knew about it. He lied about it, did everything in his power to not let this come to light. And he did a half-ass punishment because of it. So
it sounds like you're kind of over it, right? You're just kind of over the, it's gone, it's over, and the Nats beat them when they cheated, and kind of that's how you feel.
I mean, I'm not fully over it. I still acknowledge that they cheated. And at first I was mad at the Astros because they were acting like victims, but they're no longer acting like victims. They finally owned up to it. So at that point, I'm like, all right, it's time to move on. And I wanted to see my boy Dusty get a ring.
Right. That's the one real redeeming quality of the Astros. And I think that's the one thing Nats fans, I bet there's a lot of Nats fans who are out there like you who are just like, yeah, I like Dusty. I think this is not to rub it in Dave Martinez's face at all. I think they had a real chance to win with Dusty still as the manager. I think we're just seeing it now. Guy's a damn good manager. Guy just really knows how to pull the strings a lot of the time. And I think a lot of this was like player performance. Like I don't know if Dusty's in the hook for this. Like they really didn't have a whole lot in the starting pitching department, the Astros, and I thought they did a great job making do with what they had. Yeah, and I just think I think he's a really darn good manager. And so yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of Nats fans are probably in that department as well, right? The pro Dusty department. We want to see him get a ring. But to your point about the Braves, like Alex Anthopoulos making the moves for Soler had his moments. Peterson had his moments. Rosario had his moments. Duvall had his moments.
Oh my God, Adam Duvall's crushing.
All four of those guys
I know
are acquisitions that all had an impact. I mean, that is, look, I think he would have been really happy if they really hit well on two of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
All four of them hit in certain. I mean, Eddie Rosario was smoking hot.
He got traded for my boy Panda, who the Indians cut the second he arrived.
Right.
Not the Indians, my bad. The Guardians cut the second that he arrived in Cleveland. Yeah. I think the thing that made me the most mad about this Braves run is, as an NL East fan, you could probably say the same thing. We've watched this bullpen the last few years, right? AJ Minter, Jackson, guys that we've watched get crushed by the Nationals over the years. All of a sudden turn into Mariano Rivera. Like, what? Those guys went from...
But Max, this is what we say. It's a year-to-year thing, right? It's a year-to-year thing.
I know it's a year-to-year thing, but even this year in the regular season, I was watching the Nats. A few of the closers' blown saves came against the Nats. A few of Minter's worst performance came against the Nats, but no one else could touch him. But
how good was Will Smith? And that's the thing is, I'm not sure about you, but watching the games, were you ever afraid of Will Smith? No, I wasn't. But he was damn near perfect. He was awesome the entire way.
Every single time he entered the game, I was like, all right, you just have to work his pitch count. You can get to him. And it was like, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm like, what are y'all doing? AJ Minter, though, was it Minter the one that had that like streak of just like striking out guys and
I think Tyler Matzik did.
Matzik, there we go. Because Matzik was
got
filthy.
Red hot one game.
Yeah, him and Minter were just putting that bullpen on their back. And they picked up the slack for Luke Jackson because he was, of the four, he struggled the most. But no, I mean, it kind of reminded me of the Nats 2019 run. And I hate to say it, but they had the pieces, they had bats instead of they didn't have like as many of the arms carrying them, like because Charlie Morton went down, Max Fried was tipping his pitches, but he showed up when it mattered. And it was more the bullpen carrying them than the rotation, which was switched for us. But other than that, they had the bats coming up when needed. Freddie Freeman. That was one thing I was happy about for the Braves, that he got his ring, because I don't know a single baseball fan that doesn't like that guy. That dude's awesome. That dude's just such a likable guy. Like, even when the Nats had that scuffle with the Braves early in the season and they hit Freddie, like, which upset a bunch of people, Freddie went up to the Nats dugout immediately and just said there's no hard feelings. Like, how could you hate that guy?
Yeah, he's awesome. He really is awesome. It was good to see him. And look, his future is in doubt. Now, I did see, I'm not sure if you saw this, how much money, say what you want about Liberty Media. They've done a really good job. They have the Formula One rights, and they've got obviously the Braves too. I think they're the ownership, kind of the main ownership company of the Braves. They've made a lot of money, and so there are a lot of Braves fans out there who are saying there is no excuse not to re-sign Freddie. I think for Nats fans, they prefer, hey, I'd love to see Freddie Freeman not in the National League East anymore.
I think all NL East fans can say that.
Yeah, we prefer to see him not in Los Angeles anymore, or not here. Maybe
I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him in
LA. How about
you
just play for the Angels, right? How about you play? We won't see him. We won't see him do that. Go play for the Guardians. Go play for the Red Sox.
Mike Trout doesn't need pitching. Let's just get another bat.
Right. Exactly. But no, you're spot on. I mean, I'm not a huge Brian Snitker guy either. Some comments made early in the season just kind of, I didn't really see eye to eye with them, but you can't argue with the results. And look, National League East teams winning World Series and the Houston Astros in their dugout. It's a little bit of a,
it's just
something
about it, right?
A little bit of a trend, right? And here's the thing too. I'm not going to knock the Dodgers. You can say Mickey Mouse, whatever you want to say. Look, everybody played. I don't believe in that. I believe everybody showed up last year and played, and they're the world champions last year. But the last 2 full seasons, 2 National League East teams. And so, man, hey, look, can we say that the National League East was a little bit better than we actually thought this year? I don't think so. But the Braves are a great example. They won, 88 games? A great example of, hey, if you make it to the dance, anybody can win it. Anybody can win.
Yesterday, Dansby Swanson went on the Pat McAfee show. Did you listen to his interview?
Mm-mm.
He had a really great conversation. He talked about how he said in the NL East has the best pitching out of any division in baseball. And he said because of that, it makes it really hard for any team to go on a winning streak because you have to beat these guys so many days in a row.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, even though the Braves had 88 wins, it is because they're facing those guys on a nightly basis. You get DeGrom, the next day you're traveling to face Wheeler and you're traveling to face Scherzer. And then he said something that caught my eye, that the Marlins have the best rotation in the NL East.
And we were saying this before the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was a conversation we had. Was like, is there a possibility the Marlins have the best rotation in the division? And that's the hard part about this is like, that's what made this division really hard is that, okay, you want to go on the winning streak, but guess what? You get to go see Rogers and Alcantara and Lopez 3 straight days.
And then they pulled up Cabrera, and then they traded for Luzardo, and then they got a few more guys in the minors, and Sixto didn't even play this year. There was no Sixto Sanchez.
Didn't pitch at all, and then you go face the Phillies, who turned. I know their pitching's not great, but they turned Ranger Suarez into this awesome pitcher.
They turned Zach Wheeler into a.
The sad thing is Zach Wheeler didn't even leave the division, right? He left the Mets and went on and pitched really well there. Obviously, even without you saw Jacob deGrom some, but how good was Marcus Stroman this year? How good was Taijuan Walker? What's the kid they called up who was really good for a period? I'm forgetting the kid's name. Who was really good for a period of time. Scherzer was still there, and Joe Ross pitched well this year. Like the Nats were the worst part of it, but still, like even we got a couple really good Paulo Espino starts.
And then we had our own Rogers that looked good. Josh Rogers, I think, had one bad start and is like 7 or 8.
He's spot on. I think he's spot on. They're really, and especially now, the Dodgers are a whole different. The Dodgers are such a different animal, right, with that rotation. Yeah. But the Braves, they weathered it, and they weathered that, and I mean, God, that series feels like it was a long time ago, right? Dodgers play the Braves, yeah. Am I losing my mind here?
6 games.
That was. Do you remember that? It felt like it was an eternity ago.
I remember it because Dodgers fans complained that they lost because of injuries, and everyone was like, "Shut up! You lost 6 people and still have the best roster in baseball."
Shut up! Exactly. Congrats on building depth, but do not complain about injuries.
No.
Yeah. All right. Let's hear a quick word here from our sponsors, and we'll talk about some national stuff. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Go to built.com today. That's built.com. Check out their lineup of bars right now. They've got really treats for everybody, but they're good and good for you. One slice of pie has 300 calories. A Built Bar only has 130 to 180. 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein, 4 grams of net carbs, low calorie, low carb, low fat, high protein, covered in 100% real chocolate. Built is a great option for you when you're hungry. If Thanksgiving isn't coming soon enough, go for a Built Bar or 2. Go to built.com today. It's built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15, LOCKED15, LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com today. All right, Max. So you wrote a piece over at District on Deck about who the Nationals could have to come in for FP Santangelo. FP Santangelo, obviously the booth for 10 years with Washington Nationals.
Yeah, he joined in 11. 2011 was his first season.
So 10 years with the Nats as the color commentator. Obviously, there was the issue this year with some, there was some reports about
allegations.
Some off-field issues that he was having. He was out of the booth for a while, and in his stead, we saw Justin Maxwell, we saw Grant Paulson, we saw Dan Kulko was in there as well. So a rotation of guys that stepped into the booth to help out, and when FP was gone, ultimately comes back, finishes out the season, but I believe his contract was up, and they chose not to renew it. Now, one part of this is Bob Carpenter is going to remain in the booth for at least the next 2 seasons.
2 years.
No surprises there. But there is the gap to fill. So
Mm-hmm.
first question to you is, do you want a player? Do you want a player type guy to fill that role? I feel like Cole did a good job. I felt like Graham Paulson didn't really hear enough of him to give any judgment on him, kind of. Um, Justin Maxwell, I didn't love him. Thought he got a lot better as the year went along.
Agreed.
So, what kind of guy are you looking for in that spot?
So all right. So first off, when I wrote this article, I have no sources to say this. Is none of these guys are being into it. I have no idea. This is just who I thought would be a good fit or who the fan base might enjoy. I wrote this article based off of what these guys meant to the franchise, that
Mm-hmm.
they left a lasting impression. I could have gone. I was tempted to write some other people, but they were only there for like a year or half the season. So I wanted to make sure there was guys that stood out, meant something to the fan base. The fan base would tune into to listen, right? Like I know the Nats over the years, their TV broadcasts have been rated some of the lowest. And if you bring in guys that are popular, they can raise the ratings, right? They might make it more fun for guys to watch baseball. So based off of that, I was looking for guys that had significant ties to the organization.
And some of the names you came up with here, I'll go through some of them. You got Chad Cordero, and I think Chad's a pretty popular guy
Mm-hmm.
in Nats land. Gio, who we saw stop by and is this why you said it? You did it because we saw Gio stop by the booth this year, if you recall. I forget what game it was, but Gio stopped by for a little bit. If he
I
had a
actually
couple beers
I
in him too.
Yeah, I actually did it because when I was writing this article and I was trying to think of guys that had ties to the stadium, I remembered, I randomly remembered Gio walking across the stadium when he got traded to the Brewers and crying in his press conference about what it meant to DC, how he grew up there, his kids grew up there, and I was like, yeah, that's perfect. It's a type of
Mhm.
guy that like the city brought in and the city embraced, and he would be perfect because the city would re-embrace him again if he took the role.
Yeah, and he's always a smart guy. I mean, that was
Mm-hmm.
Gio was a smart pitcher. That's how really when I thought he was having success, he was kind of using that intelligence, using those smarts to really get himself in games, through games, and whatnot. Go ahead, yeah.
And also, when I looked at my list, I realized that like of the eight, I had only had one pitcher at the time, Chad. So I tried to throw another pitcher out there because some of these people, the fans, they like to listen for the insight the players have, right? And yeah, you can only learn so much about hitting, but what if you want to learn about pitching? Especially if the Nats focusing on pitching over the years, when you want to learn about what goes on the mind, especially a guy that played with Scherzer and Strasburg and the best of the best in
Hmm.
DC. So that was another thing that like went into my choice.
And let's go to some of the heavy hitters you got here.
Okay.
So number one, Ryan Zerman to me is really interesting because I said this the other day. I was kind of giving some thoughts about Zim. His fourth child's on the way, so congrats
Yep,
to
I
he and his
saw
wife
that.
Heather.
Congrats.
So congrats on that. Also, the you and I talked about it before too. It felt like this was goodbye this year, right?
Yep.
Now he played well enough to earn that role back of the team as the utility guy.
Mm-hmm.
Just a matter of whether he wants to do it or not. Fourth child away, whatever. I had said earlier this week, I really don't see Zim being away from the team, being away from baseball and the organization for a really long time. And so I was thinking, what kind of role would be good for him? This would be perfect. It'd be perfect. I think you might have to wait a year or
I
two,
do too because of the kid on the way.
a kid on the way, and also like would he sit in the booth and be like, "Man, I want to be out there right now." Could he handle that?
I
You
also
know,
think just retire if he does retire, he should spend at least 1 year with his family before going back to it. So I think the
right.
time's a little off, but I agree with you. The fan base would go ecstatic if he was the one to take this role.
Yeah, and look, I don't know how you feel, Max. I think that I don't think he's going to be away from the Nats organization forever. Like if he if Ryan Zimmerman um, retires, like you said, maybe a year away from his family, but like it's not a guy that we're going to see disappear and not be a part of the Nats fan base or the Nats culture, right? I think it's a pretty good guess to say he's going to be around the
Hmm.
team and whatnot moving forward.
I assumed that until this opening, I assumed he was just going to take over as a coach, like assistant hitting coach, instructor coach, something like that.
Right. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? All right. So another guy you got on this list, Jason Wirth. So everybody likes this idea. Everybody really seems to be. This is the one idea, and I'm looking at your comment section, looking at
Yeah.
what people are saying elsewhere. This is the idea people really seem behind. Now, here's my question. He didn't always seem like the most social individual.
No, but at times he was. And I put him on because you need a wild card, and that's Jason Wirth. Because you listen to his post game interviews, especially when he was the one that had the game winning moment. You never knew what was coming out of that man's mouth.
Yeah, that is true. He had the real wild card potential. Obviously, it was such a huge signing for the Nationals when he signed that big contract. And
And he has
God,
the perspective of he won a World Series with a different team before playing the majority of his career in Washington. He has perspective of what it was like because he started with Toronto. I want to say it was either Dodgers, Toronto, then he ended up in Philly, and he had this perspective of going to back-to-back World Series and then being offered this massive contract to help a team that was terrible, and then seeing them throughout the years get better. And then he was the mentor for Bryce Harper, so he has this perspective of mentoring one of the game's up and coming superstar. He won a ring younger than most people do. And then the perspective of what it is to be offered a mega contract to try and help a bad team for so long get over the hump. So it's just that type of insight would be really interesting to learn about.
all right, and then the last person I want to mention, and I think this guy is probably the favorite right now, is Justin Maxwell.
I do too.
I think Kolko and Maxwell are the two guys that I would say. Now, here's look. I don't think it has to be a former player. I think that, and I'm somebody who's big into broadcasting, called a lot of games. I call
Yeah.
baseball still actively for Marymount University there in Arlington. I don't necessarily think a color analyst has to be a baseball guy. I don't. I also think Dan might be the next natural fit to take over for Bob once Bob is
I
done.
think it's better to do the play by play.
And so I don't know. Maybe you sit with that for 2 years. Those two guys in the booth. Maybe Bob, I'm not sure Bob would love that because that's Bob's replacement. But
Yeah,
Bob's what, in his 60s, early 60s. I think he's getting
I think so.
up there in
Um,
age. I like Dan. I think Dan's really good. I think Dan and Justin are two guys I would actually like to see maybe split time even. And the one thing I don't know where Justin is in his the one. This is the one odd part about this. Justin Maxwell was in dental school. And so if you notice this year during day games, he was not able a lot of the time to do the broadcast because he's in dental school, which is unbelievable. Which, I mean, hell yeah, brother. Like,
yeah, no, good luck
clap
getting
it
your
up for
degree.
Justin Maxwell. Guys calling
Um,
baseball games at night. He's doing the dental school during the day. He's
fixing
got a
teeth.
family. Good for him, man.
So I actually have two more suggestions that I didn't write down. One of them, I was hesitant to write this down because I don't know if I want to see it or not. And it's take the radio booth because they're
Mm,
amazing and put them in the TV booth. This only works
mm.
once Bob's contract ends, and everyone raves about how good the radio guys are, right? But then
They're
if you do
awesome.
that, then you're gonna lose your radio guys because I kind of like listening to Nats on the radio when I'm driving home from work or driving somewhere in the day,
Right.
right? And then you have to find the radio replacements and it's all over again. But I mean, that might be easier to replace than the TV guys.
I,
But
I
they're
think
so
I
good
think
and their
Charlie Slows and Dave
chemistry,
Gagler are awesome. I think
and
they're
they're
really good.
and they have the chemistry. They've been doing it for so long, so they would
Yeah.
slide in instantly, and people would be excited. And my other one was I was reading my comments, and I was reading the comments under the Barry Cerullo article because he wrote a similar topic the day after me, and people kept mentioning Mark DeRosa from MLB Network. He spent
Yeah.
the last year of his career at the Nats. Granted, he doesn't have the ties that the other guys do, but being on MLB Network for so long, he is a big name in the baseball media world. But he would take a hefty payday to leave his cushy job to come do the booth at
Yeah.
Nats. Would you be interested in DeRosa?
I would be. The problem is you mentioned the payday it would take him to take him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that movie network job pays a lot. And also we know the Nats,
Yeah, they don't like to spend
Nats is a little
money
strapped for
here.
cash right
I
now, aren't
know.
they? Maston's a little strapped for apparently Maston's strapped for cash. So we'll see. Let's get to this list from the Washington Post because a couple of interesting names on there. First, one more word from our sponsors here. Today's show is brought to you by betonline.ag. BetOnline is the best place to get in on all of your favorite sports action. Big weekend this weekend, Max. We've got Formula One in Mexico City. We've got the UFC in New York City. We've got boxing, Canelo versus Plant in Las Vegas. We've got a weekend full of college football. We've got a weekend full of pro football that kicked off last night. We've got hockey and the NBA. I mean, is there a better time to be a sports gambler? The answer is no. The answer is 110% no. So go to betonline.ag today. Go check it out at BetOnline. Use the promo code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON when you sign up. That's Locked On. You'll receive a 50% deposit bonus today. BetOnline. They are your online sportsbook experts. All right. So we've got some more names from this list here at the Washington Post, and I'll try to make sure I get this name right. Barry Servolga, I believe that's how you pronounce it, wrote an article about 10 potential names. And so let's go three at a time here. There's Jerry Blevins, Ian Desmond, and Sean Doolittle. I'm going to cross Do and Desmond off the list here. For me personally, I think those guys are still trying to play baseball. So until that we know there's a clean break for those guys, I'm off it. Jerry Blevins seems to be out. He seems to be out of baseball. And also, he's got a pretty decent following as well. Now, he seems more attached to the Mets than he does the Nats. It feels like it's more of a connection for him. So Blevins would be my top guy out of those three, but does seem to have more of a connection to the Mets.
Yeah, when I saw Blevins on his list, I was surprised because I was like, I mean, if you want him for his insight, yeah, he'd be good at it, but his ties are very Mets heavy. Of the three, I was actually the opposite. I would have Doolittle at the top of the list only if he does retire, because the way he also puts a lot of analysis on his Twitter account, right? And I mean, he was a fan favorite, and he's a quirky dude.
Thoughtful guy, though. He's thoughtful.
Yeah, very thoughtful. And plus, as a Star Wars fan myself, I would kind of love to see the type of Star Wars puns he implements into his broadcast because it will come, and that would be entertaining.
I'm with you on that one. All right, the next three. Brian Dozier, Justin Maxwell, and then Jessica Mendoza. So let's go Jessica Mendoza first here. I think number one, she took a big hit in my opinion because she was tied to the god-awful A-Rod Matt Vescoursion crew. They sucked. They were bad. And I think maybe by association, I kind of lumped Jessica in with them, and I maybe shouldn't. I will say this. I find some of her analysis sometimes to be off the mark. I don't think she's always kind of on the right track with a lot of what she says sometimes. And this is not me. This has nothing to do with the fact she's a woman. This has nothing to do with that. I will say this. I was driving, listening to the World Series game, whatever game Ian Anderson was pitching really well in, game 1 or 2. Was it 1? I don't know. I forget which game it was.
Charlie Morton was game 1 because he broke his ankle.
Yeah. This was game 3. Excuse me, game 3. It was the first game back in Atlanta. And she was like, do you keep Ian Anderson in? No, he'd walked 3 people, and it was the third time in the line. Like, he's got no hitter going. Who cares? It's the World Series. I don't care about a no hitter. I talked about this earlier, but like, what the hell's talking about? And then I was driving a couple years ago and heard her doing a playoff game too, and she was making some off the mark points about some of the approaches guys should be taking in certain situations. I didn't agree with them either. That was a while ago. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago. I was listening to that one. It was the Cubs they were playing. So I'm not a huge Jessica Mendoza guy. I respect her. I actually think she's really good in kind of the in-studio role. I think they bring her in for like Sunday Night Baseball, or whatever they call the Baseball Tonight. I think she's really good with that stuff. Not a huge fan of her as a color commentator.
She's been growing on me, but I think she's very strong when she goes on the different ESPN shows, like when she's a guest on Stephen A. Smith. Like there's other shows that don't focus on baseball, and she comes in. She does an excellent job of breaking down and explaining what it needs to do. Also, similar to the Rosa, I think it's going to be a very hefty payday, so I think that's why they won't do it. That was the next
part of this, yes. You're spot on with that, right? Because she's at ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see who else here.
Well, who were the other two you said?
Brian Dozier and Justin Maxwell.
Yeah, Brian Dozier is Jason Wirth 2.0. He's just not as loudmouth as Wirth, and that would be so funny to watch. But like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm torn on Dozier. It's like a 50-50 coin.
I have different feelings. Jason Wirth was loudmouth to me, but it was not like this. maybe I'm wrong. Like, do you think he was a consistent loudmouth? Because to me, he was like quiet mountain man part of the time.
I think it started the last few years of his career, right? I just remember in one interview in particular, he hits like a homer, like a walk-off homer, walk-off double, something. Coco's interview him, and he's just like, "Let's go, man!" He's like, starts saying like "ass" and stuff
Yeah,
like this. I forget
yeah,
the exact
I remember
quote,
that.
and Coco was just
Yeah,
like, "You can't say that, man." He's like, he just looks at him and laughs and walks away, and I was just like, "Yep, that's funny."
yeah. There's that. Yeah. We've got Brian Schneider, Denard Span. I would love.
The
I'm a
Denard Span
huge
one
Denard
caught me off
Span guy.
guard. The
He's a
Brian
fan
Schneider
favorite.
one was those are for the old school Nats fans, or and then for your Nats fans that also root for the Mets, you got the ties there because I think Schneider went to the Mets, right?
I don't remember if he was in the Mets at some point in time. It might have been.
But Brian
Michael
Schneider was
Morris
fun
and
to
Gio
watch.
Gonzalez are also on this list too.
Um,
I'm Denard Span. You can sign me up for Denard Span.
Michael Morse has done some stuff for MASN over the years, and I mean he's hit or miss. I was never really excited
Yeah.
to listen. Like I liked him as a player, but like he never really blew me away. But like again, same with Maxwell. All these guys are new to it, and they need time to find their voice, find their style, and grow at the position. And I think whoever takes the job, unless they're already done it before, you need to can't expect them to run out of the gate and just be amazing. You gotta
Mhm.
give them a year or two. But with that said, Morse didn't really impress me. Denard Span would be really interesting, man, because
A lot of
God was
insight,
he
man. A
fun. Yeah.
lot of
Because
insight.
he
He's a
played for
smart dude.
multiple teams in multiple contenders, the Giants, the Twins were really a contender. But, you got that AL baseball mindset, you got the NL baseball mindset, and that lead off mentality. Like Denard Span was fun to watch for the 2-3
I
years he
loved
was
it.
in
My
DC.
dad was a huge Denard Span guy. I love Denard Span. Um, and here's the big thing, Max, is that whoever it is in really good hands with Bob. They're in really good hands with Bob. Bob is going to take care of. Bob's been doing this, and not just baseball. Bob's been calling sports for a long time, and that is to his credit. I'm not saying he's getting
Yeah,
too old.
because he was on the Cardinals broadcast before he came to the
Well,
Nets.
and I remember he used to do some. He did some basketball. I think he did a little bit of. And he did some AC's tournament stuff. Like he's done some other stuff for MASN too. I think
So
stepped up.
I'm looking
Did
it
some
up.
work.
He's 68, which I didn't
Yeah.
know. So it makes sense that I really do think after the next 2 years he's going to be done and they're going to find his replacement because he'll probably want to retire. But from 78 to 84, he called soccer games for Tulsa of the
Mm-hmm.
North American Soccer League, and so he did that type of
Tulsa
soccer.
Roughnecks.
He spent
He did
16
basketball
seasons
at
as a
CBS.
baseball announcer for ESPN. We did the Cardinals broadcast. So yeah, he's been around forever. I didn't realize how long he's been in the industry.
He did Oklahoma men's and women's basketball for 16 years. I mean, how? I mean, that's pretty impressive as well.
Mm-hmm.
And also, he's from St. Louis, Missouri. So shout out to where I went to college. Not in St. Louis, but in Missouri. All right, so Max, that is if you had to pick a guy now, who is your front runner? And then, so who's your front runner? And if you could pick one guy, who would it be? Like your pick.
I think the front runner is going to be Justin Maxwell. If not Maxwell, it's going to be Dan Coco. I think it's going to be one of those two dudes. If I had to pick, if I had to pick, it's a guy that's still playing and won't be able to retire for 2 to 3 years. If I had to pick, it'd be Max Scherzer because I've listened to him do he did the playoffs a few years ago, right? When the Tigers got knocked out, he did the playoffs for the with Pedro and them, and he was amazing. And I think he would be excellent at the job, but he won't happen because of the schedule matching up. So if I had to choose a guy now that schedule matches up, oh man, I'd probably go with someone that just has some insight that you wouldn't expect. So maybe more of a Geo, maybe more of a Cordero type guy.
Like that. I think it's going to be Justin Maxwell as well. If I had to pick, I go Denard Span. That'd be or
I
Gio Gonzalez or those two
yeah.
guys. Those two guys would be mine too. All right, Max, what are you working on right now? And are you as hesitant as I am to get into some of this stuff because CBA is a big question mark?
I mean, CBA is a huge question mark. I still got to push those free agency pieces, right? Just in case,
Yeah.
like, because the freeze is until December 1, so we have like 2 weeks of free agency plans. So you never know. Maybe these teams realize they have 2 weeks before baseball is ever brought back ever again, and they just want to push it. We already saw the Tucker Barnhart trade. So I got some free agency pieces working on should the Nats sign Nick Castellanos piece. Great hitter. but do you really want to see a rebuilding team take a guy with a qualifying offer? So that Ryan some stuff like that, because he will 100% decline that qualifying offer.
Yeah. All right, Max Rayman, always appreciate your time, man.
Thanks, man.